So I guess when, in terms of like what you do with the content, I know you referenced a few things here. You mentioned, using them in their CEO briefings. You've mentioned clips and things like, I guess, how do you, reuse content like in your own marketing strategy? 'Cause I think a lot of times people look at a podcast and they have this idea, like you do the podcast and that's it. But I think like the people that really get it understand that like you have the podcast, which is one part of it. And there's also like what you do with it. And I guess for you, what is that strategy of what you use podcast content for been like?
First of all, podcasts are very hard to digest by the general public, right? They have their audience for the podcast itself. Like, I'll give you an example.
Mm-hmm.
Peter Rochin does a 2 or 3 hour podcast, but on my Telegram feeds, I get to see the stuff that people have excerpted from it, the clips, right? Like your friend Hervorier over at Geopolitics and Empire, he will take certain things that are in his line of business, which is very geopolitical. Mm-hmm. And so I don't have to really watch the whole Peter Rochin thing anymore. I am kind of getting the little short and sweet of it. And it's good because it's a 3-hour show, right? And it's only so often do I have 3 hours in a car. So the point I'm making is it makes it much more consumable. And so what we do is we'll dice these things up. First of all, the host often does that these days. They come up with clips and we use those. Secondly, we create our own clips, and we've learned, I used to just put a whole 20-minute excerpt of a podcast on my CEO briefing and people would fall asleep. Instead, I do, like 3 clips from the podcast, boom, and comment on them. So I could say, okay, in this podcast, I'm talking about blah, 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 and it's relevant because. So I'm taking the clip, I'm commenting on it, and that makes it usable. And then on top of it, of course, it goes in my X feed, it goes on LinkedIn, various social media reuses, and eventually also it ends up on websites of ours. There's a ton of reuse possible. It's better than me just talking, turning on, the capture app and just talking to the camera. It's better when I'm being talked to, frankly. It just makes it more real, more interesting. And so it makes for very good reuse and syndication.